Hey guys, Spirit of the Lie here. Have you ever been playing AoE2 and felt demoralized because your opponent jumped out to an early score lead? Or even in the mid-game, wondered how much you should be reading into a score difference? Some players, when they fall behind by 1,000 or more points, seem to mentally check out and assume they've already lost the game. Or in the reverse, if they lose a game after they were up by 1,000 points, assume they must have completely thrown it away somehow. As said by the quote-generating machine Warren Buffett, seen here grinding the AoE2 ladder on his laptop when he should be working, games are won by players who focus on the playing field, not by those whose eyes are glued to the scoreboard. And that really holds up for AoE2. Score watching too much can definitely be more of a distraction than a help. Still, it's a tool that can help you get a sense of what's going on, especially if you understand the times it can inflate or hide how well a player is doing, which is going to be our major focus in this video. To do that, we're going to look at three main phases of the game, and how score really emphasizes something different in each of those. To start off, we can't talk about score without touching on how incredibly misleading it can be at face value in Dark Age. I've done a video in the past breaking down how score is precisely calculated, and I don't want to repeat everything in that, but one important thing to know is that every 1% of the map scouted gives you 10 points. That doesn't sound like a lot, but a bit of quick math in a 1v1 game means a scout cavalry in Dark Age constantly exploring gives you then 45 points per minute on average, which is about 4 times as many points as 6 shepherds generate through gathering. So the scout really has an outsized contribution while your economy is just starting up. Mongol scouts are then almost 50% higher than that as well, so it's just unavoidable that they'll always have a great score in Dark Age, and American civs are also a little above average. This means a major influence on your early score then is whether or not you push deer with a scout, as while deer give a nice boost in food income, they also tank your early game score. Pushing 3 deer takes about 4 minutes from a typical distance these days, which sets your scouting back nearly 200 points, despite your economy being theoretically in a better position than your opponent after doing so. All this to say, if you notice a large score discrepancy in Dark Age, it's definitely worth thinking about if deer pushing or a bonus could be accounting for that. Now that said, I wouldn't go as far as say Dark Age score is meaningless as a measure of how well each player is doing. The difference between not scouting with sheep and optimal sheep scouting with all sheep found relatively quickly can be a 60% higher score by the 5-minute mark. If someone has a higher score than you, not explained by a difference in deer pushing, it's very possible it reflects they're more diligent about keeping their scout moving, are better at sheep scouting, or found their extra sheep faster than you did, which may genuinely suggest they're having a better start or have a cleaner Dark Age than you. If that's a consistent problem, maybe it is something you could work on to improve, but a score deficit on its own is far from certain to predict a loss in the early game. By mid-feudal age though, differences in scouting start to be drowned out by other sources of points. One natural instinct in feudal and castle age might be then to think that a score difference reflects different sizes of your economies, and that the higher score player is gathering more resources, but there's some nuance around that, and is not always the case. First off, villagers only contribute 10 points each to players' score, so you can't really tell if you're ahead or behind in what's arguably the greatest advantage a player can have over another early. Something else adding noise to the comparison is that unspent resources only contribute 10% of their value to your score, while spent resources on units or buildings you currently control contribute 20%. So, all else equal, players who float a lot of resources or are saving up for something big will naturally tend to have a slightly lower score. There's then a delay between those things as well, and as you're training units, building something, or researching a tech, your score drops by spending those resources until that training, building, or research is finished. The most practical application of this is you can sometimes notice your opponent clicking up to the next age, which for feudal age drops your score by 50 points until you reach feudal. A wrinkle though is free techs don't count, as points are always based on what you paid. That means Viking Free Wheelbarrow doesn't increase their score like researching it normally would, Frank Knights having 20% more HP instead of Bloodlines isn't captured, and Frank Cheaper Castles or Chinese discount techs hide what they have to some extent, as they're getting fewer points from those things than civs who otherwise have the exact same buildings or techs without a discount. What this all means is that some civilizations, by the nature of their bonuses, will be doing better than they appear if free or discounted things are involved, while to some degree research can be overvalued if not immediately useful, and score also criminally underrates differences in villagers, which again only contribute 10 points each. Over time though, the total value of your current units, buildings, and techs will start to be drowned out in the score though, by what ultimately dominates, which is enemy buildings and especially units that you've destroyed. Units you create give 20% of their resource cost to your score while you control them. However, any units lost in battle permanently give those points to the other player. There's no special value assigned to villagers, and gold is weighted just as much as food or wood. So this is really where score can start to be misleading if you don't take that into account, and over time undervalues your current army and especially economy in favor of previous battle results. For example, to have a 1,000 score lead worth of extra villagers, you would need a 100 villager lead, giving you at least an extra 2,000 resources per minute, which in nearly any situation would be an overwhelming advantage. On the flip side, 20 war elephants you lost 20 minutes ago that could have very little bearing on the current game situation are also giving your opponent a similar 1,000 extra points. In a vacuum, those things clearly don't balance out, and yet score treats them the exact same. This is why if there's any takeaway from looking into how score works, it's that you can't use score as a proxy for economy size without considering how the game has gone up to that point. What makes this even more volatile is that when you lose army, your losses are turned into points for your opponent, so you end up having double the swing from a one-sided fight, even if it's just trash units you're losing. This is also why even if you get completely overrun in the late game, you may still appear to have a competitive score if you were heavily involved in a lot of good trades earlier. Similarly, a player who is aggressively pushing on a single town center can often keep up in score to someone playing defensively and booming with a much larger economy, as building raises and unit kills add up. Remember, you have to build twice as much as you have to raise to get the same number of points. That might sound counterintuitive, but the player building is spending out of their stockpile, which drops their score by 10% of that value in order to get 20% back once the building is finished. So the score only goes up by 10% of the building's cost in practice. If I want to gain 50 points, I'd have to build or train 500 resources worth, but I gain the same 50 points by killing or raising just half those resources worth of an opponent's things, meaning score implicitly favors aggression more than passive building. Of course, given that score tells you more about what's happened in the past than where things are at in the moment, a score lead isn't necessarily something a player can capitalize on, depending on how relevant those past events are in the moment. If you fall behind with a failed push and lost a lot of units, but later catch up in score, that probably means you're in a very strong position currently. And I'd argue a change in score relative to your opponent says more than the absolute difference, within reason. In terms of the main takeaways though, it's that score isn't useless, but also isn't the be-all end-all, as it can overemphasize different things at different times. In Dark Age, it's all about scouting, and differences in sheep scouting or deer pushing will explain most differences you see. In the mid-game, it gets a bit trickier, as falling behind in score can reflect your opponent just having more stuff than you, whether that be buildings, techs, or army, but differences in value lost in previous fights can pretty quickly make that comparison noisy. While losing units and buildings probably does indicate you're not doing as well, if you lose a big fight but then later feel like you stabilize, the score may still be punishing you despite being in a perfectly fine position. Especially given villagers have no extra weight, score alone actually tells you very little about your relative economies, armies, or how effectively you prioritize the right techs. As for what's too much of a score deficit or a time to get worried, a lot of players see a 1,000 score difference as an important threshold. But maybe the takeaway is it's hard to come up with a useful rule, given how many different things score is trying to combine. As janky as this video makes it seem, I'd argue score does a pretty good job, and almost always correlates well in team games with the strongest players. That said, a pro tip I figured out a long time ago when playing with friends on Black Forest, the easiest way to run up your score late, besides researching everything to spend your stockpile, is by making some siege rams and raising every building you can before your allies, even the buildings of players who have already resigned. It's an underrated hack to always end up with a score lead and associated bragging rights, making excellent use of some of the ideas we touched on. Also, if you want to push up your score, never grab the tech heresy, as you lose twice as many points from every conversion with that tech for some strange reason, suppressing your score more than it otherwise would be. That'll do it for this one though. Thanks for watching guys. I'll see you next time.